Hello, IB Bio students. This is your introduction or review to Chapter 4, Ecology. So in our textbooks, we're going to be starting off with Chapter 4. So as we kind of look down here on the PowerPoint that's loaded on your LMS page, you'll see that there are 4 different sections: species, communities, ecosystems. Section 2 on energy flow, 3 is on carbon cycling, and 4 is on climate change. So just starting with the first one, big topics that are happening in 4.1 is understanding the levels of organization. How do we as ecologists kind of group things together so we can understand how to categorize things? Are we just looking at living things? If so, that's a population. Or looking at how living things interact, that's a community. Okay. The next thing that we really want to know is the types of methods that are used to get nutrition. So I can either be self-feeding, which we call an autotroph, or I can be other feeding, which is known as a heterotroph. So autotrophs, we typically have 2 types. Those are photosynthetic and chemosynthetic. So am I making my food from light, or am I making my food from chemical? And this is the difference between plants on land and, let's say, little bacteria living at the bottom of deep sea vents. Okay. Heterotrophs go into different groups, most of them ending in "vor", so like herbivore, carnivore, omnivore. These should be words that are relatively familiar for you. You should remember them from Bio 1. What's different is we have this thing called a saprotroph, which we might have called those a decomposer when we were in Biology 1. And that just means that they actually release enzymes that digest materials, and then they kind of like suck them up. So they actually digest outside of their body, whereas the detritivore is going to eat dead matter, but they're going to digest that internally. So that's going to be more like a vulture or something like that. Okay. And so the rest of section 1 is just looking at like what are the interactions that happen between communities. Do you know the different types of symbiosis? Like mutualism is when both things benefit, like a bee and a flower, whereas parasitism is when one is benefit and the other is harmed, like a tapeworm living inside of a human. Okay, so those are different interactions that happen. Competition and predation are also different reactions that are going to happen. And it talks about each one of these. If you click through the PowerPoint, it gives you examples. I gave you pictures. Okay, so here's, pollination. That's a great example of mutualism. So take some time, look at the PowerPoint, make sure you feel really good on those different examples of symbiosis and also with competition and predation. Okay. Then in your textbook, another thing to kind of keep in mind is there's a really good example of how to do a chi-square on 209. So you might want to just look over that and see if you can do those. Section 2 is all on energy flow. So we're looking at food chains and food webs. That's something that you can just kind of read through on your own and make sure you feel really good about it. It's a lot of review from Biology 1. Okay. In section 4, we're looking at carbon cycling. So how does carbon move through the air? And how does carbon move through water? So you basically have, as humans, when we eat food, we breathe out carbon. Plants take in that CO2, and they're going to turn it into different structures, like maybe part of the leaf or part of the cell wall of cellulose, so that when I eat a piece of lettuce and I'm eating that cellulose, that stuff can get broken down. Now, we as humans, we aren't able to turn cellulose into anything, but like a rabbit and a cow, they're able to break that down and get energy from it. So when I eat a potato, that starch that's stored in there, I'm able to break that down and I breathe out that carbon. So how are we all connected together? In your book, there is an example of a carbon cycle. You should just go ahead and look through that cycle on page 226. Make sure you feel good about that. Okay.